All right, welcome everybody to track 3 of the Agents in Production Conference. I'm very excited because we are joined today by Prashanth, the CEO of Stack Overflow. And we've been talking a lot about AI in the last couple of years together. And I know you've got a very exciting view on the role of Stack Overflow, on the role of AI for software developers, and the future of all those things coming together, which I think you've called and titled in the talk "Knowledge as a Service." So we have about 15 minutes, and folks, we also have some time for questions for Prashanth. So I'll be coming back in 15 minutes to join you and moderate the session for the Q&A. And in the meantime, the floor is yours, Prashanth. Thanks a lot for joining us all the way. I know it's early where you are now.
All good. Thank you, Paul. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to this wonderful audience and share a little bit about our view on Stack Overflow and how we think GenAI is going to sort of make a difference in the world and what, the problems that we're primarily focused on solving. So with that, let me get going with Stack. I suspect many of you or most of you know Stack Overflow. So we're, obviously the world's largest software developer community and platform. We've been around for 15 years. We have close to 60 million questions and answers on every possible technology topic. Questions are asked very frequently on our platform. We have something like 69,000 tags of information that organizes our content, so very structured knowledge and data. In the context of AI and ML, we have something like 40 billion tokens worth of data on our public platform that's been accumulating over time. Which is really exciting for us as we think about the AI world. We also obviously have the overall not only Stack Overflow but our Stack Exchange sites that are close to 160 sites. So with all sorts of other technology related topics and even non-technology related topics that are all in this really, really well structured, dynamic and diverse data set that's been created over time. And no doubt our user base comes from literally 185 countries from all around the world. So it's just been phenomenal to see, the impact that we have around the world and the number of people and the people from various regions that we help as part of our mission. In terms of our products, just to sort of make sure that all of you are aware of the current state of our products, obviously we have on the bottom here our public platform or community knowledge base. And on top of that, we have two primary product lines. One is called the enterprise products line, and the other one is ads products. And I'll go into a couple of these in a bit. But our enterprise products is effectively Stack Overflow for teams with additional AI, GenAI functionality that we effectively sell into companies. That is a private version of Stack Overflow that's used for knowledge sharing and is effectively a private knowledge store within your company for all your critical information specifically focused on technologists within companies. And so that has been around since 2019. And we've enhanced that most recently with our AI functionality. The box in the middle that you see is something that I'll spend quite a bit of time on today, which is our newest offering called Overflow API, which are our AI and data infrastructure products that we are effectively now in the market with, and has received tremendous interest, and we've got great tractions and partnerships that we've created, which I'll go into much deeper. And then finally, of course, advertising, which is our oldest business line, because obviously we have a lot of folks who come to our website from around the world, so it's a great place to showcase your AI products as well as broader technology products. In terms of the problems that we are trying to solve in an AI context, they boil down to three things. One is the LLM brain drain, which is all around making sure that if humans don't stop sharing original content, then how do LLMs keep training? And of course, there's some level of debate around things like synthetic data these days, but we are convicted that LLMs absolutely need new information, novel information that only humans can create to continuously progress in the context of increasing accuracy and just the effectiveness of the models. The second one is around answers are not knowledge. What we mean by that is in this current landscape, it looks like a lot of the AI tools do hit a complexity cliff. It does obviously address a lot of the early simpler questions, but at some point they do tap out on being able to answer questions. And so what happens when your users are trying to get more advanced answers to advanced questions? And that's, we definitely would love to solve that in the context of what we do. And then finally, there's a fundamental trust issue with using AI tools. I think you're noticing this increasingly now, as people kind of make their way through the S curve, and there is still a kind of a slowdown in AI adoption in especially large enterprises and companies. And so people really want to be able to trust that they can rely on these tools consistently when doing something, for example, production grade within a bank, as an example. And this trust point really came to the surface when we looked at our developer survey that we conduct every year, and typically about 60 to 100,000 people respond from our community, and it was very clear that both last year and this year, 70% of the folks currently plan on at least trying to use AI tools or are already using AI tools for software development workflows. However, only about 40% of them seem to trust the accuracy of these tools, and this percentage hasn't really changed over a couple of years. So there's still some reticence, no doubt, about the level of trust that you can actually give to these tools. So for us, we've come up with these sort of 5 guiding beliefs as we think about the future of development of AI tools. So firstly, we really believe cost management will be a really, really important consideration for companies, because these tools are becoming expensive. So that's going to be important. These foundational models, number 2, we believe will become a commodity every day. I know all of you are in the deep end of this, which is to see all the developments, whether that's from Llama, the open source world, or whether that is a closed proprietary model from OpenAI. There's definitely a race that's on, and we ultimately believe these models will become a commodity as we move towards an agentic world. Thirdly, personalization and your data within your company, especially, I think, is going to make it absolutely critical for differentiation. And I think it's a source of differentiation, which is really, really powerful as companies think about how to compete in an AI context. Model evaluation is also all about ROI, and that is absolutely true in the enterprise conversations that we have. We're able to, companies and CIOs and CFOs are thinking about what return does this actually produce for me in the context of productivity, as an example. And then finally, legal and ethical, those debates are going to absolutely continue. Who owns the data, privacy and attribution back to the original stakeholders. We clearly have a point of view on that, which I'll talk about. And that will, I think, also grow in intensity. So we've nailed 4 different concepts in the context of having this community data in the center, which is obviously something we focus on. And we really believe in this notion of socially responsible AI, which is to do the right thing in the context of the ecosystem, so that we ultimately want to progress with the technology community and leverage AI functionality, but it needs to be done the right way. In a responsible way, to make sure that they contribute back to the communities where they've been grabbing data, as an example, to train models, etc. Secondly, the race to accuracy, I think, is very, very important, because it has created this very clear kind of need for highly effective sources of data to increase the level of accuracy, to increase ultimately that trust, as I talked about, and that is a second focus area. The LLM wars, so we not only have the big companies, with the large language models, you have all sorts of specialized small language models being created with proprietary data sets. So I think there's going to be an explosion in terms of the number of companies looking to go and build AI-powered capabilities, especially at the foundational level, to progress their mission. And ultimately, of course, corporate customers really have a very low threshold for anything that's somewhat risky, especially with things like hallucinations, etc. So absolutely, this is important in having accurate data for companies is supreme. So the ecosystem, more generally, what we've done is responded by effectively coming up with, along with companies like Reddit, Stack has effectively come up with a licensing model where we are working with these big AI companies so they can officially leverage our data to ultimately leverage the human generated data to create that feedback loop that companies and LLM companies can leverage for their ongoing development of their AI models and LLM models. And so this is, I think, a moment where the internet while it will continue to stay open for the vast community of members, it will, I think, has very much become a closed internet as it relates to companies partnering with other companies. So I think the intent for us, as we're big believers in open source, and we're big believers in staying, open as a community, and we certainly will do that for our community members. But as it relates to corporate companies leveraging data sets, it's now, I think, a very, very different world, and it has become somewhat of a closed internet ecosystem. In the context of, it's also just a couple other views on the GenAI tech stack. It's very clear that web data sources, along with things like chips and model APIs, like the LLMs, and of course the cloud environments, and then you have all the applications and tools that sit on top of that. It's very clear that web data sources like Stack, we're one of the biggest data sources, as I've described, are critical really for AI development. You can look at it in a different context as well. On the left side, you've the NVIDIAs of the world at the bottom. You've got the cloud computing companies in the bottom middle, and then you have the LLM providers. Those LLM providers are very, very dependent on data and AI infrastructure. In that context, data transformation and curation, as one example, is very, very important. We certainly will play in this space as a result of what we're doing. And our data, as we've done our own testing, has suggested that when the quality of our data is extremely powerful. So we have looked at, when we've tested our data, it shows a close to a 20 percentage point improvement on open source LLM models. And this is actually something we did with the Prosus team. And you can see that, just with Stack data being used to fine tune, et cetera, it just absolutely changes the accuracy level, and so it shows the efficacy of high quality data sets like ours. We've also looked at other external research on this topic. For example, the Meta team or Facebook team had created or published a paper about leveraging data sources like Stack Overflow, and you can see the human eval score went from like 5 to 9, and or 6.1 to 9.8. So dramatic improvements in the accuracy level and just the kind of model performance when you look at it from both these external benchmarks as well as our own work. And so it's very clear that data is absolutely a critical element. And so we came up with this thesis of how do we really bring AI and humans together on our community to ultimately drive highly trustworthy, attributed content that's highly accurate, personalized for the user, that has feedback loops. We've been in the upvoting, downvoting game for a long time. And then, of course, providing recognition back for the people that are ultimately generating all this content. And of course, this is foundational on our data. We also went and, by the way, incorporated generative AI in a whole bunch of our Stack Overflow for Teams, our private Stack Overflow enterprise, as I mentioned previously, with this functionality called Overflow AI. And we have, everything from semantic search capabilities or conversational AI, conversational search in our private interface, as well as the same capability in Slack and Microsoft Teams, and even now in the IDE within Visual Studio Code. And if you think about the latest product that we launched, as I mentioned, is the Overflow API product. And what that's all about is to make sure that we provide with customers, two partners and companies who, by the way, came to us when they saw that this is a very critical aspect of them leveraging for them actually getting access to our data. When we said, we're not going to stay open that way for companies, we now structured an approach where companies can actually leverage our data in a real-time API, where they get access to all this data that I just described to you, 60 million questions, et cetera. And we've done it in 3 different forms. All the history of comments, the learning mechanisms. There's almost like an iceberg underneath the water. And I won't go through all the detail here, but you can see that there's a tremendous amount of information and knowledge that we're able to provide for our partners and customers, so they can improve their LLM efficacy. And just to share a couple of use cases, everything from correct answers from the millions of questions to use cases like RAG and indexing, to code gen and improvement, of course, to code context, similarities between multiple tags. There's all sorts of ways we can slice and dice this information to make it really, really powerful, either for coding or non-coding use cases, because just the format of Q&A and the depth and richness that we have collected over the past 16 years is very, very useful for model training and model for fine-tuning. And so this gives you another kind of sense of all the metadata, et cetera, from the past, many years and all the ways in which we collect information. Okay, so our ultimate vision now is to make sure that we are able to meet the user wherever they are. So we're previously, all of you are probably used to coming to Google, going to Stack Overflow via Google search. That was just a user interface. And now we're saying if the user is going to spend a lot of their time in Microsoft Teams and Slack and Google Gemini and ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot, let's be there. Let's be exactly where the user is, so that when they do in fact search for a question and they're able to get the answer from those places, as long as these partners are able to attribute back to the original source on Stack Overflow, we're allowing the user to go back to their flow state, and the partner, of course, is operating with a socially responsible way with us, or engaging in that way. And then however, the answer is not available in that chat interface or through, let's say, ChatGPT, they're able to ask our community for an answer to that question. And they're able to ask our human community, of course, and the community answers, new information is created. The user obviously goes back, they get their answer as a function of being, through that integration. The contributors who provide those answers are recognized, and new knowledge is created and updated, again, with the richness that I've been describing with all the comment history, et cetera. And the world keeps going around as you can now train your models again with this updated information. So we're creating this, what we're calling knowledge as a service. We want to be wherever the user is, and we want to make sure that they continue to stay in their flow state. And we want to solve those problems I described earlier on, so that we don't lose the user if they're in any of these tools as they are trying to get their answers to the most critical questions. So our mission is basically the same, just the user interface has changed over time. And this, of course, means that we will partner in many ways with all the AI companies like the ones listed on the left. And that's exactly what we have done over the past several months. And so, for example, in February, we partnered with Google Gemini, where we have struck an Overflow API partnership with them. Similarly, we did one with OpenAI earlier in the year. Most recently, we did one with GitHub Copilot. So now you can get Stack Overflow knowledge straight in GitHub Copilot as part of a plugin we have launched. And then we very recently announced, which is not public yet, but with a top cloud hyperscaler, another partnership in a similar fashion. So we're just going about effectively integrating Stack Overflow in every possible AI functionality and AI tool where developers and users spend their time. So that's, in summary, where we are. And I think, we're super excited that we play a critical role in the AI ecosystem and technology stack as being, through our vision of knowledge as a service, being wherever the developer is, and also, of course, being a critical component of the AI tech stack for the future. So with that, I will conclude. And, you can always reach out to me anytime, either on LinkedIn or on Twitter. But with that, I'll hand it back to Paul for any questions.
Exciting. Thanks for sharing that. And it's clear, to anybody that's spending any time training models, that 40 billion tokens of the nature that you have at Stack Overflow are immensely valuable. Those are, not all tokens are born equally. And in particular, in the case of, Q&A around technical questions is those are 40 billion highly valuable tokens that I think you've explained pretty well how they are becoming part of the broader GenAI system and your vision around that. If I look at the questions here, some people are indeed recognizing that as well. So Fedor comes in with a question. It's clear that there's huge value from the websites like Stack Overflow, but what is the future when everyone will be asking LLMs for the answers? And you alluded to that a little bit, but maybe I'll give you some space to comment on Fedor's question.
Yeah, so when people are asking questions in these LLMs, as I showed with that circular knowledge as a service diagram, we want to be able to be one step behind. Previously, if the interface was go to Google and ask that same question and they landed on Stack Overflow because it was the top link, what we're able to now do is, okay, ask your question in ChatGPT. The answer is going to come straight in ChatGPT, which, by the way, has been trained off of Stack Overflow data behind the scenes, which we have done through a formal partnership with ChatGPT or OpenAI more specifically. And if you click right now, actually, if you go and ask a question, how do I do this on, let's say, AWS Lambda, you could click on sources, and the answer from ChatGPT will source a Stack Overflow link, most likely, because it's most likely it's providing an answer based off of the original content from Stack. So effectively, the user interface has changed, and the whole point is for us to be wherever the developer is. If they're spending time in ChatGPT or any other GenAI tools, we'll be there, so we can serve them.
That's exciting. And maybe a question that is related, which I can extend because you partially addressed it, from Alexander here. He asked, I assume that LLM providers should be interested in Stack Overflow community growing further to mitigate brain drain. Do you have
Yeah.
talks with some of the major LLM providers and setting up a collaboration? Will you address that? And maybe you can comment on how you think about this in the future. And maybe an extension of the question is, how do you think about Stack Overflow learning from those partners, right? So which are the questions that get accepted in ChatGPT or upvoted? Is there, have you guys thought about that feedback mechanism to also continue to grow, let's say, the value of the data for the Stack community?
Yeah, for sure. I think so. There are a couple of things. One is we absolutely believe that these companies who are signing up for the socially responsible program that we've set up to say, look, we're actually doing the right thing, not only investing back in the community, but it's also for your own good, partners, because for you to be able to generate new information from the world, this is a great place to continue to sort of work on or partner with, so that you're able to get new information, new questions that people have on their minds, which still are in the thousands, obviously, as people adapt to new technologies and so on. And that is useful to them. So they have an incentive, all these AI companies, and it became apparent, or cloud companies, it became apparent when we said, look, we are not going to allow you to scrape or download our data dumps for any commercial purposes. So that's absolutely something that we don't allow them to do. We obviously allow that for all our community users, and that we are trying to play this dual mandate of being open to our community but close to every technology company that wants to monetize off the base. So that, I think we've come up with a symbiotic relationship with many of these companies, and we'll see more of these, that we will strike these partnerships. Smaller companies also, we have an emerging offering for startups that are looking to leverage the data as well. So all the companies who want the access to the data, I think they have an incentive to keep us going, so that there's this brain drain issue does not get worse. And the second question is around, how do these AI companies provide, or how do we curate, and how do we, what is the nature of that data that we're able to gather? I think one of the ways, and I'll answer that, is many of our partners have asked for the ability to, as I mentioned, provide, not only be able to ask the question on Stack Overflow, but also potentially even answer a early AI generated from their own model. So for example, if ChatGPT or OpenAI can answer a question that is actually tricky to answer, let's say a human question that's been created, then imagine that you have multiple models that are basically trying to answer that question based on its best ability. And then that creates, let's say, a 50, 60, 70%, or maybe 80% over time, relevant of high fidelity answer, which then, by the way, is edited by humans to continue the process, and then it creates let's call it a perfect answer to that question. So there will be it'll be a great way to showcase the effectiveness of your LLM as a partner, or as even a startup. If you're saying, look, we have the best knowledge on this topic, and by the way, it's all somewhat circular, but it allows us to effectively play that neutral Switzerland role, where your multiple AIs are able to provide early answers, let's call it, or draft answers, let's call it, so that then that can be completed by humans. One other place where we're doing this, by the way, is where people are asking questions on Stack Overflow. We've created something called Staging Ground, which is now completely AI powered, where the GenAI is actually providing a kind of a friendly response behind the scenes in private to the question asker, so that you don't have the, let's call it, somewhat of a negative experience of being slapped on the wrist when you ask let's say, a basic question, as I did when I first started using Stack Overflow, and they said, look, this is a duplicate question, you're closed out. But that's not going to happen going forward, because we're using GenAI to give you the friendly feedback early on.
Very cool. Maybe one last question, given we're on time. I had one, but I'm going to go for Gio's question here in the chat, because I think it's closer to the theme of the conference, which is agents in production. He says, what about access to the API to Overflow AI for agents, right? So agents that can go into the Stack Overflow API to get the answers to their questions that they are struggling with as they're writing and executing code.
Yeah, I love the question. I think it's similar to, so our API program is, of course, what I described was the strategic partners on Overflow API. Then we have something called the emerging offering, which is actually for smaller companies that are, let's say, startups who are trying to do the same thing, but let's say with more specialized use cases. And then I can imagine a world where it becomes a self-serve capability where agents are able to tap into the API, even if they're for commercial reasons, and they're able to get this information, but they're able to do it through a transaction on our website. That's not a very sort of like fantastical world. Right now, the strategic ones are these big partnerships, humans to humans. It's kind of, I'm involved in many of these where we talk to, let's say Google or OpenAI or any of my leadership team is. And over time, you can imagine like the long tail of companies, both not only smaller companies, but also agents directly leveraging the data, but just doing it in a more self-serve way.
Very exciting. I mean, as you probably see as well, like the most mature agents seem to be in the software space, right? Using all sorts of the tools, combining basically the powers of agentic AI to help software developers do our work better. So
Yes.
I think that's an exciting starting point. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, Prashanth. But thanks so much for sharing your view, and for the folks online for asking the questions. Just as a quick update, we have a couple of minutes of cushion time as you can choose between the next talks in this track. So please take a minute, and I think we'll continue in 5 minutes. So thanks again, Prashanth, and look forward to speaking again soon.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody. All the best.